The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of metal and glass that circled the dead moon of Kelmar Prime. Inside, representatives from 47 species sat in their designated sections, each area modified to suit their particular biology. Some breathed methane, others required water tanks, and a few existed as pure energy contained in crystalline prisons. At the center of it all stood the speaking platform, and on that platform stood Deho. He was tired, the kind of tired that sleep could not fix. It's the kind that settled into bones after watching too many young soldiers return home in sealed containers. Deho had served as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 12 years now, and in that time he had attended 43 memorial services. 43 times he had stood before grieving families and told them their children died for galactic peace. 43 times he had lied through his teeth. The High Arbiter. A being named Velmoth, who looked like a cluster of floating crystals arranged in a vaguely humanoid shape, pulsed with light as it spoke. The translation devices everyone wore rendered the light pulses into words. The Council recognizes Ambassador Deho of Earth. We trust you have reviewed our proposal. Deho looked down at the datapad in his hands. Proposal was a generous word for what amounted to a demand. The Outer Rim colonies were in rebellion. The mining corporations that owned them wanted the problem solved quickly and quietly. That meant soldiers. That meant human soldiers, because in 200 years of galactic community, humanity had become the species everyone called when they needed someone else to die for them. 50,000 troops, Deho said quietly. You want 50,000 of our people to deploy to the Outer Rim within 30 days. Correct, Velmoth replied. The situation requires immediate intervention. The rebellion threatens vital resource extraction that benefits all council members, and our compensation, Deho asked, though he already knew the answer. A Thalaxian representative, slug-like creature that oozed across its platform, spoke up. Its voice came through as wet and bubbling. Earth will receive mining rights to asteroids K447, K2449, and K452. Additionally, your application for full council membership will receive favorable consideration. Deho almost laughed. The 3 asteroids mentioned had been mined to exhaustion decades ago. They were worthless rocks. As for favorable consideration, Earth had been receiving that same promise for 200 years. It never amounted to anything more than words. Let me make sure I understand, Deho said slowly. You want 50,000 human soldiers to fight a war in the Outer Rim. A war that will likely kill thousands of them. In exchange, we get 3 empty asteroids and another vague promise about maybe, possibly, someday being treated as equals in this council. The chamber filled with various sounds as different species registered their displeasure at his tone. A broken representative, a creature that looked like a mechanical spider, clicked its mandibles sharply. Ambassador, your tone borders on insubordination. Earth should be grateful for the opportunities the Council has provided. We gave you faster-than-light travel. We gave you energy shields and medical technology that extended your lifespans by decades. Without the Council, humanity would still be trapped on one planet. Deho felt something cold settle in his chest. It was a feeling he had been pushing down for years, but had finally crystallized into perfect clarity. They truly believed what they were saying. These aliens genuinely thought they had done humanity a favor by letting them die in wars the other species were too afraid or too comfortable to fight themselves. You gave us technology, Deho said quietly. In exchange for 200 years of military service, we fought the Keltharian Wars. We stopped the plague of Vexus from spreading beyond the quarantine zone. We held the line at the Battle of Broken Sky when everyone else retreated. 96,000 humans have died in Council service. 96,000, regrettable but necessary cost of maintaining galactic stability, Velmoth said, its crystals dimming slightly in what might have been sympathy. All member species make sacrifices. Really? Deho looked around the chamber. When was the last time a Thalaxian soldier died in combat? Or a broken? Or any of you? The silence that followed answered his question. Humans make up less than 3% of Council population, But we provide 97% of all military personnel. We are not members. We are employees. No, worse than that. We are tools you use and throw away. Counselor Brekvan, a Korathi warrior whose species valued strength above all else, stood from his seat. The Korathi looked almost human, except for the ridge of bone that ran from their foreheads down their spines and the predatory yellow eyes. If Earth feels the terms are insufficient, perhaps you should consider that without Council protection. Your little planet would be vulnerable to any species with the desire to take it. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Several other species shifted uncomfortably. This was not how Council business was usually conducted. But then again, no species had ever questioned an assignment before. Deho looked at Brekvan for a long moment, then did something that had never been done in the 200-year history of human membership in the Galactic Council. He smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Deho said simply. The chamber erupted in chaos. Species shouted in dozens of languages, creating a cacophony that the translation devices struggled to process. Velmuth crystals flashed bright red, a sign of extreme agitation. Explain yourself. Ambassador, the High Arbiter demanded once order was restored. Earth declines your proposal, Deho said clearly. We will not be sending troops to the Outer Rim. Furthermore, we will not be accepting any military assignments from this council until our terms are met. Your terms. The Thalaxian representative bubbled with what sounded like laughter. You presume to make demands? Full council membership with equal voting rights, Deho stated. Reparations for the families of all humans killed in council service. A formal apology from each council species for 2 centuries of exploitation. And most importantly, a complete restructuring of military policy, so that the burden is shared equally among all member species. This is outrageous, Brekvan snarled. You cannot simply refuse a council directive. I just did, Deho replied calmly. You have 30 days to accept our terms. If you refuse, Earth will begin withdrawing all personnel from council space. Every soldier, every technician, every medical officer, every engineer. You will have to fight your own wars and solve your own problems. You are bluffing, Velmuth said, but there was uncertainty in the pattern of its crystal pulses. Earth cannot survive without council support. Deho gathered his datapad and prepared to leave the platform. For 200 years, we have bled for this council. We have sacrificed our children for your peace and your prosperity. And what have we received? Scraps and empty promises? No more. Earth is done being your weapon. You have 30 days to decide if you want us as partners or not at all. He walked out of the council chamber while 47 species watched in stunned silence. Behind him, the arguing began immediately, but Deho did not look back. He had a message to send to Earth. He knew exactly what the response would be. Humanity was about to teach the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away. The message reached Earth exactly for hours after Deho walked out of the council chamber. President Soman read it 3 times in her office in Geneva, then called an emergency meeting of the Security Council. 15 minutes later, she gave the order that would change galactic history forever. Every human in council space was to return home immediately. Admiral Minseo received the recall order while her fleet was patrolling the Velis sector, a region of space that had seen constant pirate attacks for the past 6 years. Her 3rd fleet consisted of 42 ships and 8,000 personnel, all human. They had been stationed there so long that some of the younger crew members had never actually seen Earth. She stood on the bridge of her flagship, the soul's pride, and read the order aloud to her command staff, effective immediately. All human military personnel are to cease operations and begin withdrawal from council territories. No exceptions. No delays. Her second-in-command, Captain Junho, looked stunned. Admiral, we have active patrols out there. We have ships in the middle of escort missions. The civilian traffic in this sector depends on us. I am aware, Minseo said quietly. Send the recall signal. Bring everyone home. The withdrawal began within the hour. Across 40 star systems, human soldiers received the same message. Some were in the middle of combat operations. Others were training local forces. A few were on medical deployment, treating plague victims on quarantined worlds. It did not matter. The order was absolute. Lieutenant G1 was at Firebase Epsilon when the message came through. The Firebase sat on a rocky moon overlooking a contested planet, where two alien species had been fighting a border war for 3 years. Human peacekeepers had been maintaining the ceasefire, standing between two armies that would happily slaughter each other given half a chance. She gathered her company, 200 soldiers who had been living in prefabricated buildings and eating recycled food for 18 months. They looked tired and dirty, but they were professionals. When she told them they were leaving, not a single person complained. The local commander, a Volusian named Court, who stood 7 feet tall and had 4 arms, appeared at the firebase an hour later. His translator made his voice sound desperate. "You cannot leave. If you leave, the ceasefire will collapse. Thousands will die." Quan finished loading equipment onto the transport and turned to face him. "Then I suggest you and your enemies figure out how to stop killing each other. We are done doing it for you." "But the council assigned you here," Court protested. "You have a duty." "Our duty is to our own people," Giwan replied. "We have been fulfilling the council's duties for 200 years while being treated as second-class members. That ends today." Court tried to appeal to her sense of honor, her compassion, her professionalism. He offered better conditions, better pay, formal recognition. Guan listened politely, then climbed onto the transport. As it lifted off, she watched through the window as Court stood alone on the landing pad, all 4 arms hanging at his sides in defeat. Within 72 hours, every human combat unit had begun withdrawal. The logistics were staggering. Admiral Minseo coordinated the movement of over 300,000 military personnel from active deployments across Council space. They came from war zones, from peacekeeping missions, from training bases and research stations. They came from everywhere humans had been stationed. They all headed home. The Council initially dismissed the withdrawal as theater. High Arbiter Velmuth sent a message to President Soman, expressing disappointment and suggesting that Earth was being rash. The message went unanswered. 3 more messages followed over the next week, each slightly more urgent. All were ignored. On the 8th day, the first cracks began to show. The Keltharian Bros War, which had been contained by human peacekeepers for 5 years, exploded into open conflict. Without the human Third Fleet patrolling the border, both sides launched simultaneous attacks. Within 24 hours, 6 colonies burned. The Council convened an emergency session. They demanded to know when Earth would resume normal operations. Ambassador Deho, participating remotely from Geneva, simply repeated Earth's terms: full membership, reparations, apologies, and military reform. The Council voted to reject the terms 43-4. 3 species abstained. On day 15, pirate attacks in the trade corridors increased by 400%. Human patrol fleets had been suppressing piracy for decades. Without them, merchant vessels began disappearing. Trade routes that had been safe for a generation became deadly. Shipping companies demanded Council protection. The Council had no ships to send. The Broken attempted to fill the gap with automated defense drones. But the drones lacked the adaptability and initiative that human crews provided. Pirates quickly learned to exploit their predictable programming. In the Velas sector, where Lieutenant Juan had been stationed, the ceasefire collapsed within a week of human withdrawal. Both sides blamed each other, but they both blamed humanity more for abandoning them. On day 20, Counselor Breckfan proposed using force to compel Earth's compliance. The Karathi military, the second largest in Council space after humanity, could easily threaten one planet. The proposal received surprising support from species who had spent 2 centuries benefiting from human sacrifice without once considering the cost. A Council fleet of 60 ships, mostly Karathi, with support from 3 other species, arrived at the edge of the Sol system on day 23. Admiral Minseo met them there with the home fleet, Earth's defensive force that few aliens even knew existed. The home fleet consisted of 200 ships, all constructed in secret over the past 50 years. Humanity had learned early not to trust their security entirely to Council goodwill. The ships were smaller than the massive Karathi dreadnoughts, but there were many more of them, and they were positioned around defensive platforms that bristled with weapons. Minseo opened a channel to the Karathi fleet commander, a warrior named Victor. "This is Admiral Minseo of the Earth Home Fleet. You are not authorized to enter this system. Turn back now." Victor's response came through with typical Karathi arrogance. "We are here on Council authority. Stand aside or be destroyed." "I am giving you one warning," Minseo said calmly. "Earth is closed. Any ship that crosses the boundary will be fired upon. We are not bluffing." For a long moment, nothing happened. The Karathi fleet could see the defensive platforms, could see the Earth ships arranged in perfect formation. Victor was a warrior, but he was not stupid. A battle here would be devastating for both sides, and he was not certain the Karathi would win. More importantly, he was not certain the Council would support him if he started a war with humanity. The Karathi fleet withdrew. As they turned away, Minseo allowed herself a small smile. Earth had just faced down the Council's military threat without firing a single shot. The message was clear. Humanity would not be intimidated. On day 28, the plague of Vexus, which had been contained to 3 quarantined worlds by human medical teams, spread to 2 more planets. Without Dr. Hyjin and her colleagues, the local hospitals were overwhelmed within days. The death toll climbed into the thousands and tens of thousands. Hyjin watched the news from her apartment in Seoul. She saw footage of alien children dying from a disease she could cure in her sleep. She saw hospitals overflowing, saw doctors who did not know what to do. Her former colleagues sent her messages begging her to return. One message came from a Thalaxian doctor she had trained herself, pleading for help as her patients died around her. Hyjin read the message twice, then composed a reply. "I would love to help. Ask your government to accept Earth's terms. Then I will come back and teach you everything I know. Until then, you are on your own." She sent the message to the Council, along with a list of all the human medical personnel who had been withdrawn, their areas of expertise. On day 30, exactly 1 month after Daeho had walked out of the Council chamber, President Soman issued a formal statement. Earth was withdrawing from all Council treaties, contracts, and obligations. Humanity would no longer respond to Council communications until their terms were met. The Sol system was closed to all Council traffic. The galaxy had spent 200 years taking humanity for granted. Now, for the first time, they would have to face their problems without human soldiers to do the fighting. Human doctors to handle the plagues, and human engineers to fix what broke. The Council had demanded humanity serve. Humanity had walked away. Now the real consequences would begin. 6 months after humanity closed its borders, the Galactic Council met in emergency session for the 47th time. High Arbiter Velmuth S crystals had lost their usual bright luster and now pulsed with a dull, tired light. The chamber was half empty. 16 species had stopped sending representatives altogether, either because they could not afford the travel or because they no longer saw the point in attending. The news was getting worse every day. The Keltharian-Bros War had spread to 8 star systems and showed no signs of stopping. Without human peacekeepers to maintain buffer zones, both sides fought with increasing brutality. Civilian casualties had exceeded 2 million. Refugee ships flooded into Council space faster than anyone could process them. The Thalaxian representative, looking noticeably thinner than 6 months ago, reported on the economic situation. Trade had collapsed by 60%. Pirates controlled entire sectors that had once been safe. Shipping insurance costs had increased so much that some companies simply stopped operating. Entire colony worlds were running out of basic supplies because merchant ships refused to travel without military escort. And there were no military escorts to provide. On the dead world of Kethis Prime, where human engineers had maintained the massive water reclamation plant, the system had failed 3 months after their departure. 8 billion people depended on that plant. Local technicians tried to keep it running, but they did not understand the human modifications and improvements made over the years. The plant operated at 30% capacity. Water rationing had begun. Riots followed. Dr. Hyjin watched the news footage from Seoul and felt her heart break. She saw children waiting in line for water rations, saw hospitals shutting down entire wings because they could not maintain sterilization without adequate water. Her personal messages were flooded with pleas from former colleagues. They sent her technical specifications, begging for advice on repairs. They sent her patient files asking for treatment protocols. They sent her videos of dying patients hoping to appeal to her compassion. She answered every message the same way. She forwarded them to the council with a simple note attached. Earth has doctors, engineers, and specialists who can solve all of these problems. Accept our terms, and we will help. Until then, you must solve these problems yourselves. Some aliens called her cruel. They did not understand that she cried herself to sleep most nights, haunted by the faces of patients she could save, but was not allowed to help. They did not understand that saying no was the hardest thing she had ever done. The council tried recruiting other species to fill the military gap. The Broken offered to build automated defense systems, but their construction timeline was measured in decades, not months. The Volusians tried to form a peacekeeping force, but their warriors lacked training and discipline. Their first deployment to a minor border dispute resulted in the accidental bombardment of a civilian hospital. 40,000 died, Counselor Breckvan watched the Volusian disaster and felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. The Karathi had always prided themselves on their military prowess, but they were conquerors, not peacekeepers. They knew how to take territory, not how to maintain stability, and there were not enough Karathi to fill the gaps humanity had left. His species numbered only 2 billion across a dozen worlds. Humanity had 10 billion people on Earth alone. With colonies throughout their system, he began to understand. Far too late, what the Council had lost. In the Outer Rim, where the rebellion had originally started, the situation had evolved beyond anyone's predictions. Without human soldiers to suppress them, the miners had declared independence and formed their own government. 3 major corporations lost all their holdings. The Council discussed military intervention but had no military to send. The Outer Rim was gone, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Captain Taijin, who had spent 20 years as a combat officer before retiring to a farming colony near Proxima Centauri, received his first visitor on a cold morning during harvest season. A broken envoy arrived in a small shuttle and made its way carefully through the fields to Taijin's farmhouse. The mechanical creature clicked, in word as it spoke through its translator. Captain Taijin, I represent a consortium of broken industrial interests. We wish to hire you to form a private military company. We can offer you compensation beyond anything the Council could provide. Taijin continued pruning his apple trees. Not interested. We are prepared to offer 1 billion credits, the envoy said. You could recruit from Earth's veteran population. We need security for our shipping lanes and our facilities. Still not interested, Taijin replied. Go home. 2 billion credits. Name your price. Taijin finally stopped working and looked at the broken envoy. You do not understand. The days of buying individual humans are over. For 200 years, the Council treated us like tools. You gave us just enough compensation to keep us coming back, but never enough to demand respect. Now you want to do the same thing privately that the Council did officially. The answer is no. Then what do you want? The envoy asked, genuine confusion in its mechanical voice. I want the Council to accept Earth's terms, Taijin said. I want humans treated as equals, not as employees. I want the galaxy to understand that our service comes with respect or it does not come at all. The envoy left, and over the following months, 2 more arrived with similar offers. Taijin turned them all away. Across human space, other veterans received similar approaches. All refused. The unity surprised the aliens, but it should not have. Humans understood something the Council never had. Some things could not be bought. Dignity was one of them. The plague of Vexus continued spreading. By month 7, it had reached 14 worlds. The death toll exceeded 5 million. The Council begged Earth for medical assistance. President Soman replied with a copy of Earth's terms and nothing else. High Arbiter Velmuth tried a different approach. It sent a private message to Deho, appealing to him personally. "Ambassador, surely you can see that innocent people are dying? Can Earth truly stand by and watch this happen? Where is your humanity?" Deho's response was cold and precise. "For 200 years, we demonstrated our humanity by fighting your wars and healing your sick. We gave you everything, and you gave us nothing but contempt. Do not dare question our humanity when it was your lack of it that created this situation. Accept our terms, or leave us alone." Trade routes continued to collapse. The pirate problem grew exponentially. Organized crime syndicates began openly challenging council authority in sectors that had been stable for generations. Smaller species, seeing the council's weakness, made territorial demands. The Helion Compact seized 3 disputed star systems from the Thalaxians, who could not muster a military response. The council issued formal protests that everyone ignored. Ancient grievances resurfaced. Species that had maintained cold peace for decades began preparing for war. The council had built its entire civilization on a foundation of human blood and human sacrifice. And now that foundation had crumbled. Everything built upon it was collapsing. In month 9, a Velusian transport ship carrying refugees from the Keltharian-Bros War sent out a distress signal near council space. They were being attacked by pirates. Dozens of ships were in range to help, but none were military vessels. The refugees broadcast pleas for assistance on all frequencies. The message reached. Earth Admiral Minseo heard it in her office and felt the familiar pull of duty. For 3 hours, she argued with President Soman about mounting a rescue mission. The answer was no. Earth's terms had not been met. The borders remained closed. The transport was destroyed. 4,000 refugees died. The galaxy mourned, and many blamed Earth for letting it happen. Minseo stared at her wall for 3 days, questioning everything. But she also remembered the 96,000 humans who had died for the council. Remembered the families she had stood before at memorial services. Remembered the contempt in alien voices when they spoke of human casualties as acceptable losses. Some lessons could only be learned through pain. The galaxy was learning. The question was whether they would learn fast enough, whether their pride would destroy them first. In the council chamber, species argued and blamed each other while their civilization burned, and humanity watched from behind closed borders, waiting for the moment when the council would finally understand what they had thrown away. The invasion began on a Tuesday morning, Galactic Standard Time. Councillor Breckvan had spent months planning it, calculating every variable, and he had come to a simple conclusion. The Galactic Council was finished. Without human military power, the entire structure was collapsing. The smart play was to take what you could while there was still something left to take. The Karathi. Empire launched simultaneous attacks on 3 council worlds, Thalax Prime, Velos, and Kethis Minor. All 3 were wealthy planets with strategic value, and all 3 were defended by hastily assembled militias that had no real combat experience. The council had known this was coming. They had tried to prepare. It did not matter. Delex Prime fell in 4 days. The Thalaxian Defense Force, composed of civilians given 3 months of basic training, broke and ran when the Korathi warships entered orbit. Breckvan himself led the ground assault. His warriors swept through the capital city with brutal efficiency. The Thalaxian government surrendered before the week ended. 2 million civilians died in the fighting. Velos held out for 9 days, but the result was the same. The Velusian warriors fought bravely, but they were peacekeepers, not soldiers. They did not know how to coordinate large-scale military operations. They did not have the logistics to sustain a prolonged defense. When their ammunition ran out, the Korathi walked in, unopposed. Kethis Minor was still fighting when the emergency council session convened. High Arbiter Velmuth crystals pulsed with erratic patterns that the translators struggled to interpret. The being was clearly in distress. This is an act of war against the council itself. Breckvan must be stopped. The Thalaxian representative, displaced from its homeworld, bubbled with rage. Stop him? With what? We have no military. You all voted to reject Earth's terms. You all agreed that we could handle our own security. This is the result. Could hire mercenaries, a broken representative suggested weakly. With what money? Another voice shot back. Trade has collapsed. The treasury is empty. Half the member species have stopped paying their contributions. Across council space, other predatory species watched the Karathi success and began making their own calculations. If Brekvan could take 3 worlds without consequence, what was stopping anyone else from doing the same? The ancient rules that had maintained galactic stability for centuries were dissolving. On Earth, President Soman watched the invasion footage with her cabinet. The images were brutal. Karathi warriors executing prisoners, cities burning, refugees fleeing in overcrowded ships. Some of her advisors argued for intervention on humanitarian grounds. We cannot simply watch this happen, the defense minister said. This is genocide. It is war, Salman replied coldly. The same kind of war the council expected us to fight for them for 200 years. The same kind of war where our soldiers died while alien. Politicians sat in comfortable chambers and counted their profits. These are innocent civilians, another advisor protested. So were the 96,000. Humans who died in council service, Salman said. So were the families who received flag-draped coffins in worthless metals. The council made their choice. They chose pride over partnership. Now they face the consequences. The debate raged for 6 hours before Deho proposed an alternative. We do not help the council, but we help the people. He opened a direct communication channel, not to the council, but to the populations of the invaded worlds. The message was simple and broadcast on every civilian frequency. Any refugee who can reach human-controlled space will be granted sanctuary. We will provide food, shelter, and medical care. Earth's borders are closed to council ships, but they are open to those in need. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Refugee ships began fleeing toward human space, desperately trying to outrun Karathi blockades. Most did not make it. The Karathi fleet commander ordered his ships to destroy any vessel attempting to escape. Thousands died in the cold vacuum of space. That was when Captain Mira, commander of the civilian transport Indomitable, made a decision that would change everything. She was not military, just a cargo hauler who had been running supplies between Earth's outer colonies. But she had served in the Navy once, and she remembered what it meant to stand for something. Mira took her ship, an aging freighter that had no business entering a war zone, straight into the Karathi blockade around Velos. She broadcast on all frequencies. This is the Indomitable from Earth. We are here to evacuate civilians. Any ship that interferes will answer to the human fleet. It was a complete bluff. The Indomitable had no weapons and no shields worth mentioning. But Mira was betting that the Karathi did not know that, and more importantly, that they remembered what happened when they tried to threaten Earth 6 months ago. Admiral Minseo, monitoring civilian communications from her flagship, saw what Mira was doing and made a decision. She took the third fleet, 42 warships that had been patrolling Earth's outer system, and jumped directly to Velos. When she emerged from faster-than-light travel, she positioned her ships in a defensive sphere around the evacuation zone. The Karathi blockade commander, a veteran warrior named Tokfel, opened a channel immediately. Admiral, you are interfering with a Karathi military operation. Withdraw immediately. Nominseo replied simply. We are evacuating civilians. You are welcome to continue your war, but you will not stop the evacuation. Earth is not at war with the Karathi Empire, Tokfel said. Do not make this a fight. We are not council, Minseo said. We are not your enemy unless you make us one. Let the civilians through, and we will leave when they are safe. Try to stop us, and we will sink every ship you have. For 5 long minutes, nothing happened. The Karathi battle group outnumbered the human fleet 2-1. They had heavier ships and more firepower. But they also remembered the defensive platforms at Earth and the fact that humanity had been fighting wars for 200 years while most Karathi had only trained Tokfel back down. The Karathi ships opened a corridor, and the evacuation began. Over the next 72 hours, Captain Mira and dozens of other civilian captains ferried over 2 million refugees out of the war zone. Human warships provided escort, defying both Council authority and Karathi threats. They did not fire a single shot, but their presence was enough. The galaxy watched in confusion. Humanity had abandoned the Council, closed its borders, and refused to help for months. Now they were risking war to save the same aliens whose governments had exploited them for centuries. It made no sense. But it made perfect sense to Dr. Hyjin, who volunteered to join the evacuation fleet and spent 3 days treating refugees in the cargo hold of the Indomitable. It made sense to Captain Taijin, who came out of retirement to coordinate the relief effort. It made sense to every human who understood the difference between punishing a corrupt government and abandoning innocent people. On the 4th day, as the last refugee ship cleared the evacuation zone, Brekvan himself sent a message to Admiral Minseo. "You save them today, but you cannot save everyone. The Council is finished. The Karathi Empire will rise in its place. When that day comes, will you still stand against us?" Minseo's response was broadcast on open channels for everyone to hear. The Council failed because they forgot that civilization is built on mutual respect, not exploitation. If your empire makes the same mistake, you will fail too. We do not want to be your enemy, Brekvan, but we will never again be someone's tool. The Karathi forces continued their conquest, taking all 3 worlds. But the rescue operation had shown the galaxy something important. Humanity had not walked away because they stopped caring. They walked away because they refused to be taken for granted. There was a difference between service and slavery, and humanity would only offer one of those things in the Council chamber. High Arbiter Velmuth watched footage of human ships escorting refugees and finally understood what they had lost. Not just soldiers or doctors or engineers. They had lost partners who actually cared about doing the right thing, not just what was profitable. The question now was whether the Council would admit their mistake before it was too late, or whether pride would finish what the Karathi had started. 18 months. After Ambassador Deho walked out of the Council chamber, the Galactic Council stood on the edge of complete collapse. 26 species had formally declared independence. 4 separate wars burned across former Council space. The economy had contracted by 70%. Entire sectors had descended into anarchy. The organization that had maintained galactic peace for over 1,000 years was dying. High Arbiter Velmuth stood alone in the Council chamber, its crystals dim and flickering. Most species had stopped sending representatives months ago. There was no point. The Council had no power, no credibility, and no future. But Velmuth had served this institution for 40 years. It would not abandon it without one final attempt to save what remained. It composed a message to Earth, marking it as urgent and personal. The message was simple and honest. We were wrong. We exploited your people. We took your service for granted. We treated you as tools instead of partners. If Earth is willing to negotiate, the Council is ready to accept your terms. The message went to President Somin, who read it in her office in Geneva. She called Deho immediately. Is this real, or is this desperation? Deho studied the message carefully. Both, probably. But does it matter? We wanted them to understand what they lost. They understand now at what cost. Soman asked. Millions have died. Entire civilizations are collapsing. That is not our fault, Deho said firmly. The Council created this situation. We just stopped enabling it. The question is whether we help them fix it or let it burn. Soman was quiet for a long time. Set up the meeting, but we negotiate from strength, not sympathy. Earth's terms are not negotiable. 3 weeks later, a Council delegation arrived at Geneva. They came in a small diplomatic shuttle, not the grand vessels Council representatives usually traveled in. Most of those vessels had been destroyed or seized during the various conflicts. The delegation consisted of High Arbiter Velmuth and 4 other representatives, including a young Thalaxian named Nelthus, who had lost their entire family when Thalax Prime fell to the Karathi. Deho met them in the same conference room where the United Nations had been founded centuries ago. The symbolism was intentional. This was Earth's ground, and the negotiations would follow Earth's rules. Velmuth spoke first, his crystals pulsing with what the translators rendered as deep sadness. Ambassador Deho, President Somin, we come here not as council authorities, but as representatives of civilizations in crisis. We come to ask for Earth's help and to accept your terms. All of them? Deho asked. We are prepared to discuss all of them, Velmuth replied carefully. Somin said firmly, you misunderstand. This is not a negotiation. Earth stated its terms 18 months ago. You either accept them fully, or this meeting is over. The Thalaxian representative, a middle-aged bureaucrat named Velos, bubbled with indignation. You cannot expect us to simply surrender all leverage. These are complex political matters that require careful consideration of various factors. Nalthus, the young Thalaxian, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. Their voice came through the translator as tired but determined. With respect, Representative Velos, we have no leverage. Earth does not need us. We need them. They asked for partnership, and we offered exploitation. They asked for respect, and we offered contempt. Now, our worlds burn. Our people die, and we sit here pretending we have any position to negotiate from. The room fell silent. Velos looked shocked that someone so junior would speak so bluntly, but Nalthus continued, addressing Deho directly. I was 14 when the Korathi invaded Thelax Prime. I watched my city burn. I watched my family die. And I know that human peacekeepers could have stopped it. Human doctors could have saved thousands. But they were not there because we treated them like servants instead of equals. That is the truth. That is why we are here. Deho studied the young Thalaxian carefully. Why did you come to this meeting? Because I believe you are right, Nalthus said. The council was built on inequality, and inequality breeds resentment. If we rebuild, it must be on a foundation of genuine partnership. If you will help us, we must earn that help. The negotiations lasted 3 weeks. Earth's terms were placed on the table in full. Full voting membership for humanity with veto power on military deployments. Reparations for all 96,000 human casualties over 200 years of service. Formal apologies from each council species. Complete restructuring of military policy to ensure proportional contribution from all members. And most controversially, the Truth and Reconciliation process, where the council would publicly acknowledge its exploitation of humanity. Some council representatives balked at the terms. They argued they were too harsh, too humiliating. Each time, Nalthus would remind them of the alternative, total collapse with no one coming to help. Slowly, reluctantly, the council representatives agreed. The final treaty was signed on a cold morning in Geneva. President Somin and High Arbiter Velmuth placed their marks on the document while cameras from 100 worlds recorded the moment. Earth was now a full council member with equal status to the founding species. More importantly, the treaty established the principle that no single species would ever again bear a disproportionate burden for galactic security. But the signing was just the beginning. The real work started immediately. Dr. Hyjin led the first humanitarian mission back to Council space. She took a team of 500 medical professionals to the quarantine worlds where the plague of Vexus still raged. But this time, they did not just treat patients. They trained local doctors, established proper protocols, and built sustainable medical systems. The plague was contained within 6 months and eradicated within a year. Captain Taijin came out of retirement to command the new joint peacekeeping force. It consisted of personnel from 15 different species, all serving under unified command with shared responsibility. The first deployment was to the Keltharian-Bros border, where the war had killed over 3 million people. Taijin's force established a demilitarized zone and began the slow work of peace negotiations. Admiral Minzo took her seat on the newly formed Council Security Committee. She had veto power over any military deployment, and she used it liberally in the early months. Rejecting missions she deemed unjust or poorly planned. Some species complained that she was obstructionist. She replied that she was being professional, and if they wanted different results, they should submit better mission proposals. The restructuring was painful. Species that had grown comfortable relying on human military power had to build their own forces. The Phylaxians established a defensive fleet for the first time in their history. The Broken began training organic soldiers to supplement their automated systems. Even the Volusians, whose culture had been purely focused on peacekeeping, started developing actual military doctrine. The Korathi Empire, having conquered 3 worlds, found itself facing a unified response from the Reformed Council. Brekvan had calculated that the Council was too weak to oppose him. He was right about the old Council. The new Council, with human forces integrated into a joint command structure, was a different matter entirely when Korathi forces attempted to expand into a 4th system. They encountered Admiral Mincio's fleet working in coordination with Phylaxian and Volusian ships. The combined force was smaller than the Korathi battle group. It was coordinated, well-trained, and absolutely committed to stopping further expansion. After a 3-hour standoff, the Korathi withdrew. Brekvan had learned the same lesson the old Council learned. Humanity could not be intimidated. Over the following year, the Reformed Council began to stabilize. Trade routes reopened under joint security patrols. Piracy dropped by 60%. The various independence movements either negotiated peaceful settlements or were brought back into the fold through diplomacy rather than force. The galaxy was not perfect, but it was healing in the council chamber. Now filled with representatives again, Nelthus stood before the assembly. The young Phylaxian had been elected as the new High Arbiter, the youngest in council history. They had campaigned on a platform of accountability and genuine equality. "We gather today to dedicate the memorial of service," Nelthus said, their voice carrying across the chamber. "This monument honors the 96,000 humans who died in council service before we learned to value their sacrifice. We cannot bring them back. We cannot undo the injustice of treating their lives as expendable, but we can ensure that their deaths were not meaningless." Outside the council station, the memorial floated in space, a massive structure of crystal and metal, bearing the name of every human who had died in council service. At its center burned an eternal flame, visible from anywhere in the system. President Soman attended the dedication ceremony along with thousands of families who had lost loved ones in council service. She stood before the memorial and thought about the long journey from exploitation to partnership. It had taken 18 months of isolation, millions of deaths, and the near collapse of galactic civilization to teach the council a simple lesson: respect cannot be demanded, only earned. That evening, Deho stood on the observation deck of the council station, looking out at the stars. Admiral Minceo joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Do you think it will last?" she asked. "This new council?" "I do not know," Deho admitted. "People have short memories. In a generation, they might forget why we walked away." "Then we will remind them," Minceo said firmly. "That memorial is not just for the past. It is a warning about the future. No species will ever again be treated as tools." We made sure of that. Across council space, a new saying had emerged in dozens of languages. Some species said it with respect, others with wariness. But everyone understood its meaning. Never mistake human kindness for weakness, nor human patience for servitude. Earth had taught the galaxy that the most powerful thing you can do sometimes is walk away. But they had also taught another lesson, equally important: when you return. You return as equals, or not at all. The story of when humanity walked away would be told for generations. It's passed down as both history and warning. And in every telling, the lesson remained the same. Civilization is not built on exploitation. It is built on partnership, respect, and the willingness to stand for what is right even when the cost is high. Humanity had paid that cost for 200 years. Now, finally, the galaxy was learning to share the burden. And that made all the difference.